Hello, my friends. This is Lynda Lippin, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Well, hello, my friends. This is your host, Lynda Lippin, and welcome back yet again for another episode of the Pilates Goddess podcast. Today, I am continuing on my deep dive into the Pilates mat exercises, and we're talking about the classical Pilates mat exercises, which I am discussing in order. And today we have the roll over. So let's kind of think about what we've done so far in the mat, right? We've gotten down on the mat. We have done the 100. So we have stabilized our torsos. We have stabilized our spines. We have worked on getting air in and out of the body, on moving the rib cage, on filling and emptying the lungs, on really getting the abs firing, on working through the legs and the hip flexors. And really, it's kind of a full body exercise, even though you're kind of staying in one position and just moving your arms and breathing. Then we had the roll up, right? And the roll up has us stabilizing our legs and our lower bodies and articulating our spines in flexion, and then back from flexion into extension, not hyperextension, but extension. And then we go into an exercise that moves the spine from the bottom to the top in that same flexion. The roll over is an excellent exercise for the majority of people. And again, this is for people who have healthy spines, right? And healthy necks and healthy shoulders. The rollover shows up a lot on the reformer, shows up a lot on the Cadillac, and on some of the other pieces of equipment. We'll talk about that. But realistically, the rollover is a difficult exercise, but important for healthy spines, for being able to stabilize through the upper body and the neck and shoulders while mobilizing the spine, the hips, and the lower body. There's a lot going on here. Now, in the full form of the exercise, you can actually start with your legs straight down on the floor. If your abdominals are strong enough to do it, then you lift those legs right up from the floor. You roll back overhead. In the original Pilates move, you are dropping the feet down toward the floor. I tend to teach it with legs staying parallel to the ground and not the foot drop to the floor, simply because the population of people who I teach tend to have a little more compromised spines, a little more compromised neck and shoulders. And we'll talk in a minute about why those people really shouldn't be doing the rollover, okay? And then you roll over with your legs closed. You open your legs hip width there. You roll down with control, bring the legs down, close them, and come back up. You do that 3 times. This is how I learned it. And then you reverse it. You go up and over with your legs hip width apart, and then you close your legs to roll down. Okay, so you do it in both directions. If you know the exercises on the reformer, that might sound to you a little bit like the long spine stretch, which it is, except you just have a little more of the overhead action going on the mat because you're not pushing up into the straps, which kind of can make it a little more difficult to stabilize that upper body. What I like to envision when I'm teaching the rollover and when I've done the rollover, and you may have noticed that I said when I have done it, I really don't do the rollover anymore for my own body. I don't do it because I have vertebral degeneration in my neck and some pre-existing shoulder injuries. And the rollover just, even though I can do it, doesn't make me feel good. Okay. It leads to kind of headaches and neck aches later on in the day and into the next day. So I just don't do that exercise anymore, but I do teach it. So what I will invite you to think about when you're doing something like the rollover is that you really want to platform through your upper body and your shoulder girdle. Okay. So the concept here is that your collarbones are nice and wide. Your armpits, the back of your arms, and your shoulder blades are solidly pressing down in toward the floor. You are maintaining a little bit of your cervical neck curve, so you are not trying to fully flatten the back of your neck. As you lift the legs back overhead, you are again trying to keep the collarbones open so that you're actually moving your rib cage and your torso inside of your shoulder girdle. Yeah. And then as you roll down with control, it's the same thing. You keep your head in the same position, your neck in the same position, your shoulders and arms in the same position. It is a significant amount of work in the back of the arms and the back of the shoulders to hold that, to maintain that as you roll down. It can be easier sometimes to have the arms a little bit wider away from the body because it becomes a little more accessible, say, to use the larger muscles of the back and shoulder to stabilize. It can also sometimes be easier, which is kind of interesting because you wouldn't necessarily think this, if you are on a raised Pilates studio mat that has dowels on the top end of it, to hold those dowels and have something to push against, not pulling off, but pushing against as you are doing that rolling from the bottom of your pelvis. Okay, so there's a lot going on there. The rollover is not for these people. Okay, the rollover is not for your people with degenerative vertebrae or discs in their neck and cervical spine. Okay, this is not a great exercise for anyone with glaucoma or high blood pressure, where having their head below their heart can be a big strain. This is also not going to be a great exercise for your folks with osteoporosis who do not need to be going into any kind of loaded thoracic flexion, and that this is a big loaded thoracic flexion. The point of the exercise here is that it is a loaded thoracic flexion that you're learning how to control through. So if you have osteoporosis or osteopenia, this is not going to be your exercise. Okay. It's not going to be a great one for you. So if you have a healthy spine, however, go for it. Go for that roll over. It is a fabulous strengthening exercise. And you may wonder, like, why would we be going into this kind of large, intense spine movement at the beginning of the mat? Note that for Joe Pilates, these weren't necessarily big, huge, intense spine movements. These were spine movements that people could learn to control on their own. So, for him, the mobility of the spine was as important as the stability of the spine. And in many ways, that's how we should be thinking as teachers. Really, unless you're working with folks with a compromised spine, you want to be moving them in different directions. Now, the roll over does show up in different ways and is considered, by the way, to be an advanced exercise. Okay. The jackknife on the mat shows up before the rollover in terms of the beginning, intermediate to advanced exercise hierarchy. So know that it's an advanced exercise. It is not for the beginner in the Pilates mat, and it can be very, very difficult. So what do we do to modify for the rollover, or just add variation to the rollover? If you are simply teaching Pilates mat or doing Pilates mat and you find this exercise, to be very difficult, I invite you to start with your feet on the ground and just do some articulating shoulder bridges. With that will work that sense of your spine peeling off the ground from the bottom, right? And reaching forward. The more beginning exercises that teach this lifting up of the spine from the bottom, like the jackknife, like the corkscrew, like an articulating bridge, like any of the rolling exercises, will all ultimately help the strength for the rollover. What will also help the strength for the rollover is strengthening the shoulders and the shoulder girdle, specifically the back of the shoulders, so that folks can access those muscles to hold themselves steady at the top. So this is where you want like strong spine muscles, you want strong lats, you want strong trapezius muscles, you want, all of those muscles to be working well. It is not just the abdominals. Remember, please, that every Pilates exercise, especially on the mat, is a full body exercise. Okay. So the reason why this comes early in the mat for an advanced exerciser, note, for an advanced exerciser, is that it is a relatively simple flexion from the bottom and rolling down, right? And what comes next then is another stabilization exercise. So if you look at, just the first 4 exercises, you have stabilization in the 100, then you have lower body stabilization, articulation of the spine from the top, upper body stabilization, articulation of spine from bottom, and then leg circles coming back into a little more stability. See how this goes? This is, and it's lovely because this going back and forth between mobility and stability shows up through the entire mat if you're doing mat in the Joseph Pilates order. Now, again, you can make choices here, okay? You can add a magic circle either between the ankles or outside of the ankles for the rollover and have folks pushing or squeezing into the circle at varying times during the exercise. Okay. You can also do the exercise using a tie 4 or bands, right? Kind of giving a little more support into the leg bungees or the bands as you are coming up and down from the bottom of the spine. You're also going to see this kind of exercise show up a lot on the reformer, okay? We have actually several exercises on the reformer, some with feet in the straps, some with hands in the handles, right? Where you are rolling up your spine from the tail going up. Some are more advanced, some are more beginning. But again, your short spine, your long spine, okay, your bottom lift, your overhead, okay, these are all of these exercises. I would even argue that your semicircle okay, is going to come out of this as well. And then you have your regular things like your corkscrew and the ones that we know and expect to kind of have, these considerations. The rollover, again, is a great exercise. It works everything. Again, strengthening of the back of the upper body so that you have the back of the shoulder girdle and the neck strength and the back strength in order to hold yourself together and keep the collarbones open as you are moving through your entire lower body and spine. You're using the inner thighs and you're using the outer thighs because we're going through an opening and a closing. You are using all of the abdominal muscles. You are using your glutes a little bit. You're working through the pelvic floor. You're rolling through those ribs. There is so much going on in the rollover. And so if you're teaching it or you're trying to put the rollover together for yourself because you're just working, on your own from home and you're looking at the photos or videos of folks doing the classical mat, then what I want you to think about is what are the exercises you can do to open up and strengthen the back of your upper body, okay? You're looking at maybe rowing exercises. You're looking at all the exercises on your stomach. Seriously, like all the exercises on your stomach. You can do versions of pull straps from the long box on the mat. You can have the arms down by your sides, just lifting up your upper body, back, chest, and arms. You can open the arms out to the side, pull them back into your hips, and do all of that. That will start to help strengthen that upper back. Swimming is a great exercise for strengthening the upper back as well as the lower back and the glutes and all of that. Any of the bridging work is going to be helpful in this. If we then look, say, at some of the stuff on the Cadillac, you're looking at your tower, maybe you're looking at breathing with the bar, you're looking at the rollover. There's like a whole lot of exercises there as well. Push through with feet, going up into the bridging and back down. So I want you to think about all of these places in the studio where we might be doing something where we are articulating our spine from the bottom to start while stabilizing the upper body. There's also big versions of this on the high barrel, right? Where there's versions of these on the smaller barrels where you don't have to move quite as much, but can still play with those same mechanics. You can even do, if you're working from home, if you've got a roller, you can do a little bit of that kind of work of peeling back from the pelvis while your pelvis is a little bit elevated to start with. So I wouldn't necessarily shy away from the rollover, but respect the rollover, okay? Know that if you want placeholders for the rollover in your own workout or your clients' workouts or your classes, you're going to look at things like bridging, you're going to look at pelvic curls, you're going to look at those kinds of exercises. You are going to understand that all of the back and shoulder strengthening exercises that you're doing, as well as any mobility work from the bottom of the spine, will ultimately help you get to the rollover. But know that the rollover is considered to be an advanced exercise. It is not the easiest place to start to work from the flexion from the bottom of your spine. However, it is an extraordinarily useful exercise for folks who have spines that are healthy, okay, and who really want to work on that level of control of their spine. and control of their abdominals and control of their torsos and how their bodies are moving. And if this is you and you're doing this at home, then I recommend going through, all of the other exercises that work on, again, the upper back, the shoulder girdle, the lower abdominals, and the movement in your spine, because those exercises will ultimately help you do a full-on roll over from the bottom and do it well. Okay? Remember, Rome was not built in a day. Neither was New York City. Neither was any place. You need infrastructure and internal strength in order to be able to get to these more complex advanced exercises. So work on that first, and then start to build your way up. All right. If you have any questions, any concerns, as always, you can email me, Lynda@LyndaLippin.com. You can DM me on social media. I'm Lynda Lippin or Lynda Lippin Pilates everywhere. You can also go to my pod page, pilatesgoddess.com. You can send me a message from that page. You can leave me a voicemail on that page, and we can continue this discussion. As always, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And if you like it, I would love it if you would leave a rating and a written review. You can do that on Spotify. You can do that on Apple Podcasts. You can do that on my pod page or on Podchaser. But it helps other folks who could really use this find the podcast. All right? So have a great rest of your day. And I'll be back with you on Thursday. We'll talk about some leg circles. Have a good one. Thank you so much for listening to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Music brought to you by Nerd Salad. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you liked it. And please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks.